Hello, everyone, and welcome to Front Seat to Climate Change. I'm Mahin, your host for today. And today's episode is all about individual action and the role ordinary people play in addressing climate change. When we talk about environmental issues, the conversation often focuses on governments, corporations, and global policies. But real change also depends on everyday choices that people make, the habits they build, and the awareness they carry into their daily lives. From carbon footprinting and sustainable lifestyle to tree plantation campaigns, climate technology, and public engagement, today we'll be exploring the many ways individuals interact with environmental issues. We'll also be discussing how these individual actions connect to a much bigger picture of climate action and environmental policy. And joining us for this conversation is Arif Jalil Piracha, the founder of CarbonWise, an app that is designed to help people better understand their environmental impacts and make climate awareness more practical and accessible. There's a lot to unpack in today's discussion, so without further ado, let's get started. Hello, Arif. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, G.
Okay, so climate change is no longer a future problem. We're already living through its consequences. Why do you think people still struggle to connect environmental issues with their everyday choices?
So I think there are multiple issues, right? So number one, of course, will be our lack of awareness. Now, when you live in a country with X million number of people, when the literacy rate is so low, the question is, do these people even understand what they're doing? And I also think that, if we look at it from even our perspective, the middle sector or maybe the SECPAs, etc., I think we tend to look through a micro lens. So we'll throw a plastic bottle outside, but we actually won't realize the impact of that because we're looking at it from our perspective. Now, if 1 million people did the same thing, and if we got to go to these rivers to see where all these plastics go to, for example, that would be a whole different story. So I think overall, I mean, if we to see where we are to go, we really need to educate the masses before we can really, expect any real impact. And of course, then we've also got the government policies that are sort of working in silos as well. So it becomes very difficult for people to understand and comprehend and move forward and really see what the impact is. I mean, the impact for us, as I always tell people, is that if we just simply look at the health statistics, and if we understand that when the AQI is very high, what the number of people going into the hospitals are, and instead of calling it a virus, and we actually put in proper accountability and understanding that this is because of the environment, then maybe we can bring about a lot of change. But until then, and until the masses are aware of what the impact is going to be, it'll always remain this situation until an enforcement comes in, let's say.
Absolutely. I think that's such an important starting point, especially because, awareness and action, they often,
Yeah.
sometimes they don't go hand in hand, but sometimes they have to go, hand in hand. In your opinion, what does true environmental accountability, look like for citizens, especially in countries like Pakistan, where climate awareness is, I'd say still developing?
I would say accountability is going to be very negligible, and I don't think we can really move to an accountability until we fix all our infrastructures and we develop a mechanism in such a way that we can actually see broader impact happening and effects coming into play. So, from a Pakistani citizen's perspective, it'll always be, given the affordability of the country, why should I spend on this? In most cases, more, even if we talk about organic foods or if we talk about electric vehicles, we're talking about spending more money than what a normal vehicle perhaps would cost. Now, do they know the impact? Are they bothered about the impact? I think until they actually get a proper feeler for it, accountability among citizens will perhaps be unfair, right? Because until we have a systematic, uniform law enforcement that applies to everybody, it'll always be that look what they've done to us, and why should we do this to the environment? I mean, it's always going to be feed our households first, and then it's going to be let's look at the impact later on.
So tree plantation campaigns are, often heavily promoted, but many plantations, they fail over time. What do you think makes a tree plantation initiative genuinely, sustainable and impactful?
It's very easy. The trees need to survive. They need to be looked after. They need to be monitored. They need to be tagged. They need to be checked. They need to be calculated. Most plantations that happen and happen in that are happening, we tend not to see the broader impact. I met a client the other day, by the way, and I'll keep the companies anonymous, but she said to me that I did a plantation of 40,000 trees in one small area. Then went back to my team and I said, why aren't we doing this? They said, could you tell us what the mortality is? Because it's just not possible the trees can survive within that small framework. So for us, and again, understand the fact that the trees actually will start providing proper value after 10 to 15 to 20 years. Until
Yeah.
then, they're going to be sucking up minute amounts of carbon dioxide, giving off enough, very small amounts of oxygen. So in that case, in this situation that we're currently in, it also makes sense that instead of planting 100, you plant 1,000, you plant 10,000, you plant 1,000,000, so that you can start seeing broader impact happening across an environment. But again, the fundamental problem is that how do you get to ensure that those trees actually survive, and how do you actually calculate, or how do you monitor and see if they're actually providing any value? So, I mean, I'll give you an example. We went through an entire plantation phase with Etchison College. And it was a very simple model. The model was that whatever Etchison had, as a fellow Etchisonian, we said that we will double that. So Etchison has 8,000 trees. So what that means is that each and every single tree has been counted and it's been accounted for. And as a consequence of that, we can work backwards and say, okay, we can get a broader perspective in terms of how much carbon dioxide is being absorbed as a consequence of that. When you have that, then the numbers come in and then the data starts coming in. And then you can actually start looking at meaningful impact. And what we were able to do is we are able to actually now calculate every year what the small forests are doing. Now, not only that, we have people on board. We have people, we are monitoring and we are auditing. And I think there's no rocket science behind it, right? It's not us that I can say that, we are only doing this. Others should do it. I know the Supreme Court judgment requires organizations and corporates to do it. You'll ask any corporate, they'll say it's just a tick sign off the box. You ask anybody after 5 years what happened to that forest that you did 4 years ago, most of them won't even know. If you look at the maintenance, you see, the whole point of this is that if you're like anything, just like a toddler, you need to be nurtured. If you don't nurture these forests, if you don't grow these forests, if you don't look after these forests, and if you don't start calculating the impact, then how are you going to actually be able to say, okay, this is what I need to create a clean environment or clean up the water and whatever parameters we've decided. It has to be data based, and that is the problem here that we are planting now. I'll give you an example. We're doing this largest carbon sink on the ring road.
Mm.
8,000 trees. No Bahar Bottlers has sponsored it. A lot of corporates are coming on board to be a part of this, right? And the Ring Road people have been so supportive on this. They provided us the land, they provided us the preparation, they provided us the water source. That's all we need. It's very simple. And now, if you extrapolate this across, let's say, if I say to myself, okay, I've just planted 8,000 trees, why can't I get 10,000 people to plant one tree each? And look after it and understand what the meaning of that is. So if you couple all of these together, only then are you going to actually be able to bring in some sustainability into our environment, into our water management, into our waste management as well. So I mean, there's a lot that can be done. If you go to all the schools right now, you'll hardly see any school that has recycling and all of these separated. Why not? What happens? What happens when I put all that recycling stuff into that recycling part? It'll still go into the same bin in most cases. So, there's a lot that needs to be done. Now, coming back to trees, um, uh, I know DHA, for example, they planted about 4 years ago. They planted close to 100,000 trees. Now, you might say that's not a big number. We need millions, and perhaps you're right. But you know what? They they checked, they looked after, they put on the supports for all the trees, and they made sure that whoever they gave that contract to was accountable for each and every single tree. And they invested in making sure that those trees stood still, they were vertical, they were tied down. And that's what you do. You go to Istanbul, where I think it's 36%, if I'm not mistaken, green. Look at how they're maintaining it. Look at how the governments are doing it. Look at how the people are doing it. So so we need to so we, that's one thing. The other thing is that we're also cutting off trees, right? And if we were to understand that not only by cutting off all those trees, we are letting off all the carbon dioxide into the air. And I don't think very many people know this, right? And whatever has been absorbed by the tree, when the tree is cut, it all goes back. So, and I give the example of the one at Rahat, that the really old tree that they cut down.
Yeah,
Just imagine how much carbon dioxide just went back into the atmosphere because of that. So we need to have a double model. We need to first look at ourselves. We need to say, okay, what have we got on hand? And now what else do we need? How many more do we need to achieve whatever our goal is? And all of that has to be, documented and numbered. If not, then we will never reach a figure where we can say, okay, if we do this, then we'll be able to achieve this.
absolutely. I think the two things that you mentioned are that, we really need to focus on transparency and we really need to, monitor and tag our trees. And then, of course, we need to focus our energy on preserving the trees that we already have because there is a massive focus that, we often do a lot of plantations, but those trees are not monitored and tagged. Thank you so much for this amazing explanation. But beyond
And if
plantation,
I
yeah,
may, there was this case. I think it was a student from Harvard. He came up with this great idea. He just got up and he went to the Amazon and he met all the tree loggers and he said, how much you getting paid to cut these trees down? And the landowners and the tree loggers said that this is the cumulative amount of money that we earned. He said, okay, I'll pay you the same amount of money.
yeah,
Uh, just don't cut them down. So what happened? We were able to preserve a forest. He also made money in terms
yeah,
of carbon credits, and because the dollar amount made sense, right?
yeah.
So there's a lot of creativity, there's a lot of mechanisms, but again, we cannot continue to keep replanting if we're going to keep destroying as well. We need to create sustainable forests. We need to be legislation needs to come into play on this.
Absolutely. So beyond plantation rise, technology is also beginning to shape the way people, engage with climate issues. And technology is increasingly being used to tackle, environmental challenges as well. How do you see digital tools and climate tech shaping the future of climate action and public awareness?
For Pakistan, right?
You could say Pakistan or worldwide, both, but
So I mean,
especially for Pakistan.
if I was to look at worldwide, I would again say that perhaps there is and there continues to be impact.
Yeah.
People are taking more responsibility. People are, they're making a difference. They're bringing in small habitual changes into their lives. Again, it's all boils down to awareness, right? Now, when we look at a market like Pakistan, where we have the majority of people who are barely, able to survive on the monthly stipend or money that they earn, um, are we going to be able to have encourage people to invest? Probably not. Are we going to be able to bring about a change where we are able to bring habitual changes? I don't know. I mean, I'll bring it all back down to curriculum and awareness and education. Until people understand what this impact is, why would they even bother going through an app like mine, for example? And this is again when people ask me, "What are you doing?" And I tell them that we're targeting only the top tier, and people who actually understand. Those people who have gone to colleges and universities, maybe perhaps also studied environmental sciences. So given that. I don't see that we'll be able to really achieve, or anybody will really be able to achieve a critical mass in terms of deployment and habit change and overall environmental impact through technology per se. Yes, technology will be very important, at least from a legislation perspective,
Mhm.
and from a monitoring and from an enforcement. And from maybe a finding perspective, or charging people, and I think Safe Cities is doing a great job on that, where they're able to monitor vehicles that are emitting smoke and then catch them later. So that's where it is. But again, you have to ask yourself: that person who got caught in the with that engine like that, didn't he know? And the
Yeah.
answer will be no. In most cases, it'll either be no, or it'll be I knew, but I couldn't afford, and I have to live. Give me a solution. So I don't think technology is really going to help the masses in terms of creating much awareness and creating an environmental impact. But I mean, again, from our perspective, every little matters, right? So even if even if we can bring about a 2%, 3% change in people's lifestyle habits that will have an impact on the environment, maybe we've achieved what we want to achieve from our micro level. But at a macro level, I think it's going to be very difficult.
Absolutely. I think on a macro level, if we talk about habitual changes, then we still have a long way to go you know, when it's about technology. But yes, when we talk
Yeah.
about legislation efforts and government efforts, especially when we talk about adaptation efforts and mitigation efforts, technology has a great role to play.
Yeah.
Because without
And
technology, we won't be able to, get that far ahead. So one,
absolutely, and
yeah.
sorry to cut short, I think you see we're speaking to Jazz at the moment, and Jazz has been very responsive to this. Now, Jazz is also a sort of should and does and hopefully will continue to play a role of somebody who can influence environmental impact, right? With the database, with the number of phones that it has to its access, sending a message across or communicating a message is all of a sudden very easy. So I think moving forward, technology could educate people. At our level, perhaps not, but at a very big level where these telecoms can play a big role and where the government can play a role, you never know, change could happen.
So carbon footprinting is still a relatively, unfamiliar concept for many in Pakistan. Why is it important, for individuals to measure and understand their personal emissions?
Well, I personally think that carbon footprinting is an alien concept across the globe. There have been many initiatives, and once again, the government role comes in to spread awareness and then create impact, right? Within Pakistan, we unfortunately are again a victim of the developed world. At that particular time, we've seen that developed countries at one time or even now are the biggest polluter, and we've seen in the terms of flooding what the biggest impact we've had. So what does one do? How does one talk about the devastating floods, and how does one say, okay, if I wanted to create a difference, what do I do? And again, people may, like you mentioned, people might say that, but our contribution is going to be very negligible in terms of carbon footprint, but it's still going to be there, right? And whatever we can change, we should change, if not for ourselves, but then at least for our future, right? For our generations, for our kids. And this is why carbon footprinting is so important, and this is why it's so important for people to be able to measure what they're doing, and understand thereafter what that means for them and for their families and for the environment and for the world.
Absolutely. I think Pakistan emits, less than 1% when it comes to,
Yeah.
the emissions. But I think it's very important to understand this concept because globally, this concept is obviously getting a lot of traction as well. And companies are using mechanisms that include
Yeah.
different sort of carbon footprinting. And, to be at par with the international world, we have to be equipped with it. Yes, of course, like this term does not appeal to the masses. And this will not appeal to the masses because obviously, like, this is a very new term. And of course, like when we talk about the masses, they're being impacted in terms of flooding and so many other more critical issues. But this term, I think, is more relevant for corporations and is more relevant to, educational institutes
Yeah.
who
And
are
and
sort of.
also the law of numbers, right? If we were sitting in the West, we would have many corporates doing a lot of investment, and you would see visible impact. Now here, how many people do you think are really going to be pumping in the funds to genuinely create an environment, a cleaner environment? You'll have your multinationals. Again, they're bound. They're not. A lot of them probably might not be doing it out of will, but out of necessity, right?
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
talk to a lot of people, a lot of organization heads, they'll say that we have to do it because we have to do it, not because we want to do it. If we look at a country like Pakistan, we can see that we won't see that much corporate participation. So what does that leave you with? That leaves you with people like us. That leaves you with the masses where we know that we have such a huge population that if even we can tap a certain amount of that population, we can actually create some impact. And that is the game.
That is. This also brings me directly to the work that you've been doing through CarbonWise, and now I understand that it's basically a carbon footprint calculator for individuals, and it helps citizens, calculate and understand their carbon footprint. So, could you touch a little bit about that and tell us about your app and what inspired you to, focus on carbon footprinting and to make a tool for, climate awareness and action?
We were a victim of this concept as well. I came up with a calculator, and why did I do that? Because simply because I went online to try and download a calculator to see what my emissions are, and to my surprise, I couldn't find any. So there was no carbon calculator in Pakistan at all. We knocked on various doors, we didn't get any response, so we thought, okay, then let's just do it ourselves. So it was a 2 year painstaking process where I went to vehicle organization of manufacturers. We went everywhere and we tried to understand because there's no data as well, right? So it's very, very difficult. So you can, I mean, in some circumstances, it was so difficult for us to find the conversion that we thought maybe it's just not worth putting in that particular factor. But again, carbon footprinting is essential, at least in my view, for people to actually have a number. And then once they have that number, it's essential for them to understand what the impact of that number is. What are they actually doing? Otherwise, again, throwing plastic out or not recycling is just a more of a chore than it is a necessity. For us, if we're going to create the habits, for example, we have a compost manual one at home. Again, just with the understanding that, okay, there's no point recycling if we can't do something after that, right? So unless people are able to actually see it's created impact, right? Because when people go onto the app and they're able to see that a horrible number, they realize that it's either due to traveling or it's due to the energy. Now energy has an easy solution. You go to solar. Traveling also has a solution. You go to electric, right? So if people don't know what they're creating, how are they going to actually be able to say that, okay, this is right, this is wrong, or this is too much, or this is too little? And if it's too little, okay, what can I do to improve? And if it's too much, what can I do to really improve? So that's going to be the question ahead. But they need to know. You can't just come up and say, your car emits smoke, or you travel so much. Do you have any idea what impact that's having on the environment? Because then people will clearly say, no, we have no idea. So the idea behind the carbon calculator was to sort of wake up society. People can go online, download the app. They can put in all the data, whether it's regarding their garbage, their diet, their transport, their apparel. We know fashion has a huge impact on the environment as well. And international air travel. When you do all of that, you get a figure. But again, we got that figure, and people were still confused so as to what that figure means. So there's the need to not only take what we've calculated, but also see, what can be done to sort of influence that, and what is the benefit of doing that. And that is where then again I learned the hard way that I kept the carbon dioxide sequestration figure there, but I also translated it into easy language, which was in terms of number of trees. Now people download the app and they say, all right, this is how much I'm doing. But if I was to go to offset myself, I would need X number of trees. And then now there's a call to action. And the call to action is that they know what impact that every month, okay, whether they choose to do anything or not, that's something different. But we've done our job in terms of communicating the message that is in the form of that this is the impact that you are creating. And this is why it's been so important to do this translation into normal language. And again, our country is too young and perhaps immature to understand what carbon footprint is. And most countries are, by the way. The legislation plays a large role in those countries, is playing a lesser role, a more important role nowadays, but a lesser role overall. So slowly we'll see a change. But again, at the end of the day, people understand better when you bring it into consumer language. And that's why we went into this tree. And that's why I found this passion to keep planting trees. And as a consequence of that, we were able to plant about 80,000 trees last year. As a consequence of that, this year along the ring road, salute to the ring road authority, they planted over 100,000 trees. And we've added that into the app data as well, because they've said, Kitty, we'd like to also do some calculations and see what are we able to do. We've told Etchison College that 10 years from now, when they look at a topical view, they'll see hopefully that everything is blue, whereas all around them, the environment may be impacted. So you're creating change, right? And you're making people healthier, and time will tell whether these work or not.
Absolutely amazing. And I think this really ties to our previous previous questions and what we were discussing, that until unless you're not aware about it, you won't take any action about it, right? So it's great that, it focuses on different categories like transportation, because especially in cities like Lahore, smog is a
Yeah.
big, big problem. So I think if
I
we
also
do.
think that, kudos to DawnNews, right? I mean, like I mentioned in the beginning, lack of awareness. So what is DawnNews doing? I think it's the only, media giant that took on this issue. How many people have actually talked about it and created impact? And every year I've been monitoring this Breathe Pakistan and what it's doing. And this is what needs to be done. But perhaps it needs to be done at a much bigger scale that even Dawn is doing, right? And that is where small players like us come into play, and we sort of act as a support mechanism along the peripheries.
Absolutely. And I think that this really appeals to the younger generation of our society, because it's also interesting to see how younger generations are increasingly, engaging with these conversations in really new ways. And they're increasingly becoming aware about climate change, technology, entrepreneurship, and advocacy. So, how important do you think is, youth's involvement in shaping the future of environmental policy and climate action?
I think it's critical. I think along the road, these are going to be the future leaders, right, of our country, and these are going to be the movers and shakers, and this is why we work with the colleges as well. And it's not just about commercial activity of planting trees; it's also about educating the youth so that they can go on. So every one person we are able to educate, perhaps he or she is able to educate another two people. And that is where the masters will come into play. So we've always made it a point that wherever we go, we explain what we're doing and we get people to engage. When people get their hands dirty, and again, this is comes back to tree plantation. When we are able to get the students' hands dirty, they have a more understanding of what's going on, and they can take that theory on and see, okay, I did this in my youth. What was the impact? What am I doing? And we're seeing a flurry of environmental sciences programs coming out in the education sector now, whether it's globally or here. And because although the US has moved away from this Paris climate, it's going to come back, right? The discussion is going to continue. I believe the government of Punjab has done a phenomenal job in terms of controlling the AQI this year, but there's so much more that needs to be done. And again, the government can't be expected to do it alone. The media giants can't be expected to do it alone. So who's going to do it? The youth, the masses. These are the people who are going to create the long-term impact. If we are somehow able to enforce and educate and create awareness and create jobs, for these future youth, for these future environmental pioneers, create business and environmental funds, or VC funds. So, there's a lot that needs to be done, and I firmly believe that we can't do it. It's going to be the youth.
Absolutely. There's this band of people where we see people like you and, others in civil society doing so much on climate change. And then, there's a lot that is going on, and that there's a lot that is being done, within the government organizations as well. But at the same time, there often seems to be a gap between, environmental discussions and what people actually experience in their daily lives. So there's a environmental disconnect, I'd say. So how can, climate policies, become more practical, accessible, and visible in everyday life?
Right. So again, our biggest problem that I believe is that we've always worked in silos. The federal comes up with its own plans, the provincial comes up with its own plans. Us as humans have our own plans, and until we start, combining all of these issues, we're never really going to be able to create a macro environment where we can say that we have been able to achieve certain whatever our SDGs may be. We need to talk about climate audits. We need to start talking about these massive infrastructure that we create. What is have we had a climate audit on it? What's going to be the future, the impact of it in 10 years' time? What has the Saiwal coal fire power plant? What's been the environmental impact on that? Why was it let through? Maybe it was financially feasible. I don't know. But moving forward, I think that until I'll give you an example. These Look at these electro buses in Lahore. right? I think that it's a brilliant idea. And after getting rid of all those kale dhuan wala gadiyan, and you got electric buses, what did they do after that? They printed all the pictures saying that this is the benefit. Fine, they put in their own pictures as well, but the credit goes to them, right? So what have you done? You've made something practical, okay? You've created an awareness. All of a sudden now, this document has become a service.
Yeah.
And then people will talk about it. Could you मैं तो electric bus पे गया हूँ, मैं तो ये किया, मैं तो वो किया. So the government needs to move out of this. It needs to create a national plan. It needs to do a national enforcement, but it also needs to create national awareness as well. And if you don't do that, we'll have the same mess that we had. If you remember last year, the chaos we in Lahore when we had to get our car stickers done
Yeah.
for the emissions testing. So, but when you have good systems, and after that, it became really good. And I believe every single human can create impact. Now, even if I may give one example, I know if any Etchisonian parents will be listening to this, they'll be very upset with this. But I took a case to the Etchison management to request them to start charging for vehicles that are not electric. And although parents and those so vehicles like mine, which are not electric, we were charged an X thousand rupees for a car sticker to enter the school. Those that were electric were not charged at all. Brilliant. 2,500 cars enter Etchison in the morning. 2,500 cars leave Etchison in the afternoon. Imagine the impact. Imagine taking this across all government organizations. Just think about it. It has been a huge success in Etchison. What your paise difference है, we've been able to create an environmental fund, and now they have money to do more, create a bigger, more green. Etchison wants to go to net zero, and I think it's going going in the right direction. Why can't we blow
Absolutely.
this up across the nation? Why can't everybody do this?
Yeah.
A lot of it
Like,
doesn't take money, by the way. A lot of it just takes initiative, willpower.
yeah. Absolutely. I think when there's a will, there's a way, and a lot can be done. And like you mentioned, that everyone can make a difference, and every person can make a difference and can create an impact. To just wrap up this conversation, I would just like to ask you that when you look at issues like carbon footprinting, tree plantation, climate technology, public awareness, and environmental policy together, what do you think is the most important shift Pakistan needs to make in order to truly build a sustainable future?
So, so again, I think from a national perspective, there needs to be synergies in policy making, and there needs to be climate audits. If you were to ask me what would be the single most important thing, I would probably say to revisit the impact of the fuels that we are using in our vehicles. If there was one national agenda, and I know it costs a lot of money, and I know it's very difficult to do, but again, from a long-term lens, if we can fix our fuel, we fix a lot of the problems. So for me, and then if number two should be our energy projects. What are we doing what impact are they creating on the environment, and what are the energy environmental friendly ones and which are not? So for me, I would probably look, and again, if we look at the Lahore, whenever we talk about the poor AQI, we talk about the massive amount of urbanization and transport in the city. So if we were to able to invest all of this money into, or talent into creating, making cleaner fuel. So just imagine the impact on the motorbikes and the cars and the environment and the trucks.
Exactly, especially in cities like Lahore, and because we face smog, which is a national problem,
Yeah,
I think the first and foremost,
absolutely.
priority that can be prioritized in the ranking can be transport. And there are a lot of programs that the government is also targeting to counter this problem that we have. Thank you
Absolutely.
so much for your brilliant insights.
Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much for having me.
So today's conversation really highlighted how climate action is not only shaped by governments and large institutions, but also shaped by everyday choices, awareness, and participation of ordinary people. From carbon footprinting and sustainable lifestyles to climate technology, tree plantation, and environmental policies, all of these issues are deeply connected, and meaningful change depends on how seriously we engage with them both individually and collectively. And with conversations around sustainability continuing to grow in Pakistan, it's becoming increasingly important to make climate awareness more accessible, practical, and action-oriented. I'll see you in the next episode.